Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to Success Thursday, this week with Miguel Moro. Hey Miguel, welcome back.
Thank you, Vasco. A pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. We're very happy to have you here today to explore what success looks like for us as Scrum Masters. But before we dive into that, we always ask, what's your favorite retrospective format and why?
Well, my favorite retrospective, of course, you need to change from every time, but one of my favorites is what I call the Retrospective From Future. I think it's very important because usually in retrospectives, you just see the end of the sprint or the period, and you see the results, and sometimes people try to justify what happened. But it is very important to go back to the beginning of the sprint or to the period you are going to analyze, and sit there and say, okay, if we know now how this has ended, what we should have at the beginning to succeed at the end of the sprint, what we were missing when we started that we know now. So I think that makes the team think of what has been the process in the sprint, and also to think of what has been discovered or what has changed in the sprint in order to improve or to get up to the final success, or what made us failure. So it's not just think of the result, but think in the process, I think.
Yeah, I like one twist of that question, which is, okay, so if we are going to succeed, what will need to happen, right? Like another way to look at this is to do this, the anti-retrospective, which is if we're going to fail, what do we need to do, right? And I really like that because it brings people to, so first of all, it puts people in a much more relaxed kind of a position because they're talking about the future. It hasn't happened yet. It's not a problem, right? Like we can even be funny while at the same time discussing real and important things, but because it doesn't happen, it hasn't happened, there's no consequence. So we can, be imaginative and talk about like crazy stories or whatever. But the other thing is, like when you ask people what needs to happen for us to succeed or what needs to happen for us to fail, they really know those things. And it's almost like it's inside of them, like they can bring those up, and then you can write them down and put them on the wall. And then during the sprint, you can point and say, hey, John, do you remember when you said that to fail, we just need to refuse other people's ideas? What are we doing now?
That is very interesting because sometimes you, as you say, at the beginning, you know what you not need to do because you are going to fail, but we forget about it. So it's very, very, I like very much your approach of this. So
it can become like kind of a useful mirror for us to always go back to and say,
And it's funny that at the beginning they say, okay, we are never going to do this because this is not going to work. And they do it the next day. So.
Indeed. All right, cool. So that was the retrospective. And of course, that's one of the tools we use to reach a successful outcome for our own work. So Miguel, the question of the week, as I usually call it. The question of the week is, what does success mean for you in your role as a Scrum Master?
I think, or what I am trying to do, is that the team does not need me anymore. So I always say that I will be successful when the team doesn't need me anymore. So I will change to another team or to another company because I don't have anything to do there. Of course, there is always, as you know, teams changes a lot. There are new people coming. There are new products or whatever. There is always things where you can provide your ideas or your point of view or help them to think about how to be successful. But I don't have a concrete metric to measure my success. But when I start not being needed at meetings, or when I am not asked about, hey, Miguel, what can we do here? When they start to take their decisions, is where I think that we need to change to another different team or to another different role, or force yourself to think and see if there is any other way you can help the squad that maybe is not in the Scrum Master role, but participating or proposing new things to do.
So we very often get that kind of answer here, and there's one question that I always ask, which is, all right, but what does that look like now? So one, you've said a couple of things, right? So if you stop showing up for meetings, people don't say, hey, why didn't you show up, right? Like, we missed you or something like that. So that's one way. But on the other hand, they can tell you that they missed you even though they don't need you, right? Like, so that's the thing, that it's not so easy to know if the team really needs you or if they just say they need you. Likewise, it's also not so easy to know if the team does not need you or if they just don't want you and they say they don't need you, right? Like, so one of the difficult things I find in figuring out, when is the right time to move on is really to look at, what are the signs, what are the things, the behaviors, the things they say, what they do that tells you, Miguel, that, yeah, maybe I'm not needed here anymore. It's time to move on. So what do you look at? What are the concrete behaviors? What are the behaviors you want to see? What are the questions you want to see asked to tell you that, okay, it's time to move on?
Yeah, I think it's not a fixed rule about that. Is you need to be part of your intuition about working with teams to see when you are not so needed, or how you need, or how you can teach them to work by themselves. For example, I stop talking in meetings. It's first thing. I stop to facilitate. I may attend, but I say, okay, who is driving today the I don't know, the retrospective, or who is driving today the planning. I am not going to talk because whatever, I invent any reason, so that you can see that they are valid. You know your team. If you are a Scrum Master, you know your team and you know the people, and you know how that when more or less they are going to work well together. And what I do is I force to myself to stop proposing things. I start when you start moving from agile advisor to move more like the coaching part, to let them to answer themselves question, and then when you see that this is working, you just stop doing this, or you also make other squad members to play that role. So always there is the way when you say, okay, this week I am busy, someone is going to act as a Scrum Master this week. So at the end, they collaborate. There is not just one person that acts as a Scrum Master, but they help each other. So it's something that there is not, as I told you, a fixed measure, but it's something that you can have the perception of when your team is a bit more mature and you start
but I like the tips that you shared, like stop talking in meetings, stop proposing things. When somebody raises a question, look at them instead of offering an answer, right? Like, I think that's a great set of tips. And also one that has worked well for me, at least, is in the daily meetings. I noticed that people were looking at me when they were, I guess, in their minds, reporting. So what I did is that I stopped looking at people and I just wrote stuff down as if I was taking notes. And of course, it was back in the time when we were all in the same office. So I actually used pen and paper so that it wouldn't look like I was distracted by Facebook or anything, right? Like, just write down the stuff that is being said as a way for you to acknowledge, also understand, but also to leave space for our team members to come up and say whatever whatever questions they might have. And my own experience is that sooner or later, the team members start taking up the slack of the silence, right? They start filling in the silence with their own questions and comments and so on. So that's another tip that we can use for that.
Yeah, I think, for example, you can get to meetings like 10 minutes later and see what happens. They usually have started
Did
with
they
something,
start? Yeah.
and that's good.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Miguel.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Part of a successful Scrum Master job is to help the product owner. Tomorrow we explore that critical role in Scrum, the product owner role. Tune in to learn about product owner anti-patterns, what you can do to help the product owner, and a real-life example of what a great product owner is and what made it so. Tomorrow on our Friday Product Owner episode. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.